青に溶けて流れてく涙の粒、迷いなく包み込むぬくもりに出会った。真っ白な雪のようにどこまでも素直な言葉、普通の羽まとった心を動かしてく。傷つきたい優しくなれる君のその笑顔なく守り抜きたい願いは一つ。時を超え刻まれた悲しみの記憶、まっすぐに受け止める君は光の天使。あの日胸に灯った永遠の炎、深い闇解き放て自由の扉開いてく。強く果てない未来。緑の月に映し出す心の影、寂しげにつぶやいた君のそばにいたい。真実と向き合うこと教えてくれた勇気は僕を駆け巡って夢に目覚めてゆく。触れ合う気持ち離れないようにしっかりと抱きしめて、確かな想い貫いてゆく。銀の海に隠した空白のページ、君だけが知っている本当は僕に見せて、吹き荒れる切なさに生まれゆく誓い、もう何も怖くはないよ。結んだ視線そらさずに大切な今始める。 秩序をなくしてる重ね合う見た目が君という現実君との毎日を優しくしましたいつもやがてないからどうにこの従来ない全ての街の子赤くぼやくその私に熱く響く命の鼓動強く深く貫いてゆく真実を絆だけの心燃やして君と明日を切り開きたいこの中に全てを止めて戦うような希望を信じて中古だよね打てば打てば決戦まっすぐ歩いてく中古すぎるよ Yes 夢見たこと全部本当に叶っていくから今日はどんなキャラになる大切なの忘れはないまでどこまで行っちゃうどこと行っちゃえあとはいつでもアンロックできるどんどん変わるドキドキしてるみんなと私の心信じて歩いていくまっすぐにおはしゅともに目を覚めてたほらね機嫌は直ってるおよしゅとぐない夜になるとなんかいろいろ考えちゃうけどもっと明日は今日よりもいい日になるって思ってみようしんどくなったらちょっと休憩なくしちゃいけないものがあるからどんな時でもどこにいたって一人じゃないって気づいているよ感じてるよ大丈夫いつでもアンロックできるどんどん変わるドキドキしてるみんなと私の心信じて歩いていくまっすぐに 初めて知る涙は温かくて優しい。ここじゃないどこかでもずっと覚えているから探していたぬくもり、君がくれたかけら、一人きりで凍えた心溶かしてゆく、幻じゃない世界、君が私に示してくれたの。自転車全力でペダルこぎながら坂を登る、風に膨らんでるシャツも今はもどかしい。やっと気づいた本当の気持ち、正直に譲んだたった一つこの道を走れ。好きならば好きな恋をこの方に素直になろう。好きならば好きな恋を胸の内さらけ出そうよ。会いたかった会いたかった会いたかった Yes 会いたかった会いたかった会いたかった Yes 君にどんどん溢れ出す汗を拭わずに素顔のままこの熱が飲んでる夏へ続く近道さ。そんな上手に話せなくてもずっとそれいい自分らしい生き方で走れ。誰よりも大切だから振られても後悔しない。誰よりも大切だからこの気持ち伝えたかった。好きならば好 飛ぶぜ Go Go Let's be 動めく怪しいエナジー容赦はしないぜ見てろよ命に変えても守るよ愛する勇気を強さに変えろやり抜く気合でピンチを越えてく手強いやつほどワクワクもでかいぜドッカンドッカンついてるドッカンドッカンチャンスさ焼きの風にビュンビュンとってドッカンドッカンついてるドッカンドッカン明日も答えをもう魂は知ってるのさドラゴンソウル
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
希望を結んで笑ってみたら変わった私に慣れた気がした小さな勇気が自信になるあなたに会うまで忘れてた女の子はみんな素敵になれる特別な魔法をしてるの正体ドキドキさせてるいつでもそう気分たりのいろんな私見せてあげるだからもっともっと素直に溢れるこの気持ちをあなたに届けたいよ受け取ってねます時代の花束抱きしめて私にしたいきっとなるから大きな嘘に届くように心の翼を羽ばたかせ女の子はみんな綺麗になるの大切な人に出会ったら正体ウキウキするような始まり期待している知らないあなた探したいよもっとずっとずっと近くで一緒に夢を見たいね手と手をつないだなら
So you wanna be a master of? Do you have the skills to be number one? I wanna take the ultimate step, find the courage to be bold, to risk it all and not forget the lessons that I hold. I wanna go where no one's been, far beyond the track. Learn the way to take command. Use the power that's in my hand. We all live in a Pokemon world. I wanna be the greatest master of them all. We all live in a Pokemon world. I put myself to the test to be better than all the rest. So you wanna be a master of Pokemon? Do you have the skills to be number one? We all live in a Pokemon world. I wanna be the greatest master of them all. Pokemon.
恋のささやきは見た今でよいつの間にか虜ショコラあらぼり夜明けの星屑散りばめてるエメラルドの瞳狙いはあなたいつでも目線は探してるの心臓が止まりそうショコラあらぼりバラ色の空オレンジの雲小指つないで飛ぶ夕暮れのデートシュサシュガルーショコショコルーきらめくハート秘密の宝石意地悪してても男の子は本当は恋してるショコラあらぼり恋のささやきは見た今でよ本気になっちゃダメショコラあらぼりバラ色の空オレンジの雲クールな王子様狙いはあなたシュサシュガルーショコショコルー情熱の赤秘密の宝石知らんぷりしてる男の子はキスを狙ってるのショコラあらぼり本当は恋してるショコラあらぼり本当は恋してるショコラあらぼりララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララララ
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause. Pokemon, gotta catch you like me. Pokemon, I know it's my destiny. Pokemon, yeah, you're my best 少し寂しくなるからこの瞬間一つになれた気持ちをずっと温めて宝物にしようそうさどんなに負けそうでもまた力になるよもっとファイターを上げて笑ってみせてきっと心軽くなるまた歩き出せるいつかまたここで会えるその時までもっと輝けるように今胸に誓ってまた知らない新しい自分自身探していたけど一人じゃ見つけられなかった今わかったよそれぞれ違うみんなを認め合えた時に生まれ変われるんだとそうさどんなに心が遠くてもまた一つになれるそしてファイ声上げて歌い続けてきっと心踊り出すまた通じ合えるいつかまた涙流す時が来たらいつも思い出せるようにこの歌を刻もうもっとファイ顔を上げて笑ってみせてきっと心軽くなるまた歩き出せるいつかまたここで会えるその時までもっと輝けるように今胸に誓ってこの歌を歌おうラララララララ君を呼ぶ旋律はこの空の果て
永遠を誓い祝 空腹を授けよう。
回り続ける定めとしても
今を生きてほしい。
光を受けて
守りたいものある時を越富士山開いたらいろんな私たち笑ったりしましたりで受けるんだし、何これキャラじゃないけどありすぎ楽しすぎマジでさいいかありがとう。迷子になっても心の卵大丈夫私のとこ戻っておいで。君と一緒にほらホステーション君がいるからぬるぬるぬる君といつかで一緒にもう一度心を大好きだよみんなそばにいたよね好きよしくくしそうな朝だランチのおしゃべりだなんじゃそりゃ当たらない占いだ塗りつけんかしたりめでたし仲直り久々に反省しました。私の全部を知ってる卵いつだって私のこと守ってくれる空まで飛べるよステーションピカソみたいにぬるぬるぬるお菓子は任せてちっちゃい体に心を離れないでみんな一緒にだよねずっと泣いたり笑ったりもう一人の自分いつだって私に元気をくれる君と一緒にほらホステーション君がいるからぬるぬるぬる君といつかでちっちゃいもう一度心を大好きだよみんなそばにいたよね 誓い合ったわないずっと無駄に開いたこらえてたもう見失い今と向き合うために行こう君と共にない日二人で過ごした季節未来かだって笑い合っていた離れていた時間も無情なほどに全て奪ったあの日の君の笑顔を記憶と二人の確か左を遠くこだわっていた時間を取り戻すために今失った僕を超えるあの日のキスまで誓い合ったわないずっと無駄に開いて詰め込めうちずっと愛の何も恐れはしないいつも君と共に
これまでのゴンの戦いにその実力を認めた密か。二人の戦いはいよいよ間近に迫っていた。
夢に触れている目指したものがあるこの手は何を求めている確かなものを探して踏み出したらそこに君を待っている幾筋もなき光が大空もこの大地も全てあなたに吸い込んだ止まることない明日を追い越して君は強くなれる Are you for your dream? Every trainer has a choice to listen to that voice inside. I know the battle may be long, winners may have come and gone. I will carry on. Yeah, this dream will last forever. This dream will never die. We will rise to the challenge every time. Yeah, this dream keeps us together. This jolt, you and I will be the best that the world's ever seen. Because we always will follow this dream. Forever. It's always hard when the journey begins. Hard to find your way, hard to make amends. But there's nothing you can't do, 'cause you got the power inside of you. It's never easy to make a choice, to keep things inside or raise your voice. For everyone there comes a time when the light inside begins to shine. Not always right or wrong, as long as your spirit's strong. It's not always win or lose, it's the road you choose. The answer's within. It's not always black and
your heart always knows what's right. Let the journey begin.
At approximately 3:37 EST this morning, something the size of an Airbus Atlas passed through the Great Lakes waterway. It must have come in from the Atlantic, navigated its way through the natural channels and man-made locks that make up the St. Lawrence Seaway. I was working up top when I first heard about it. It was Billings, the poor bugger. At first, I thought he was messing with me, getting me back for the prank I pulled a month or so ago. But when he finally clicked off the radio and stomped up and over to where I was sitting so he could talk to me face to face, I realized he wasn't messing with me at all. He looked scared, terrified even. This wasn't normal for Bill. So, I said, leaning back in my chair and grinning, "You saw a thing?" He nodded, his face earnest. "And what exactly is this thing?" "It was big," he said, waving his arms around wildly. "Too big, like the size of a damn plane." "A plane?" "A cargo plane, one of those ones that the military uses." "That makes no sense," I said. "It wouldn't fit." "That's what she said," Billings said, pitifully, letting out one sharp bark of nervous laughter. It rang flat around the room we were in. I sighed, then said, "All right, let's go check." "Really?" he said. He sounded semi-hopeful, but still scared. "Really? Come on." He watched as I stood up and stretched, then followed me over to the room where we kept the radar and CCTV monitors. "So," I said, "where do you see it?" "Just as it appeared in the lock, about 5 minutes ago." "All right, let's see." I sat down in front of the monitors, rewound the tape, and pressed play. "Bill," I said, turning back in my seat to look at his face. "There's nothing here." "Nothing?" "Nothing. Take a look for yourself." Bill maneuvered around me, then whined in fear. "It's there, man," he said. "Right there. What the hell even is that?" "Where?" I asked. "I don't see anything. Are you messing with me? I have to say, this is one of your weaker efforts, Billings." I ran a hand through my unkempt hair. "Look, I have to get back to work." But Bill didn't let up. He leaned around me, rewound the tape again, and pressed play, then repeated the process 2 more times. "Bill," I said, "come on, stop. Look, it's right there. Can't you see it? It just bloody appears, man, out of nowhere." I blew some air out of my nose, looking at him with a sort of sympathy. Maybe the guy was working too hard. Maybe he was starting to snap. "Okay," I said. "I'll humor you." I swiveled back around in my chair and leaned in closer to the screen. And there, just there, right underneath the water's surface, I saw it. A glimmer. It was faint, nearly invisible, but there it was. There was something about it, how it caught the barely visible light, how the water moved around it, something strange and sinister. "Weird," I said. Billings perked up. "You see it?" "I mean, could be a school of fish, caught up in the lock or something." "Man," Bill said, "I've been working here for 9 years, and I ain't never seen anything like that before." "Huh," I said, then rolled myself over to the second set of monitors where the radar was. "Well, damn." "What?" Bill quickly hobbled over to where I was and looked down. "What the hell?" "Yeah, well, that's weird." The radar showed something big, just like Bill said. It was slowly inching down the waterway, morphing to fit through it. I switched to real time and saw this thing, whatever it was nearly out of the second lock, which was bizarre because we hadn't lowered the water or the gate. It was just disappearing, slowly but surely. I stood up, fast, then made my way back towards the monitor's room's only doorway. "Hey, where are you going?" Bill called out. "Angus," I said. "I'm going to go check with Angus. Over on the other side. My radio's upstairs. Hang tight." I left Bill standing there, watching me walk away with a freaked out expression on his face, and made my way back up top. My radio was on the table where I'd left it, sitting next to my phone. I picked it up and pinged Angus. Angus picked up immediately. "Yeah?" he said. He sounded worried. "Hey, Angus, we're getting some real weird footage over here. I was wondering if you..." "It's nothing," Angus said, his voice coming in staticky over the radio. "What?" I said, "No, everything looks fine over here." "You sure, man? You looking at your radar?" "Yeah, kid, I'm sure. It's nothing. And if anyone asks you about it, you didn't see anything." "Wait," I said. "What do you mean if anyone asks me about it?" Angus didn't respond. "Hey, Angus, what did you mean if anyone asks me about it?" But Angus had turned his radio off. I set my radio back down and said, "Damn." I left the room and walked back down to where the radar and CCTV monitors were. "Hey, Bill, you're never going to believe this. I think we might have a regular conspiracy." I stopped and looked around. "Bill?" I turned back towards the door I'd just entered. "Hey, Billings, where are you, buddy? Bill?" Bill didn't answer. "What the hell?" I mumbled to myself, then left the monitor room to look for Bill. But Bill wasn't anywhere in the building, which meant there was only one place he could be. Outside. "Oh, for goodness sake," I said, then ran back upstairs to grab my coat. Billings was standing just at the edge of the lock, looking down. Above us, clouds skirted across the sky, obscuring stars every now and then. "Bill? Bill? Hey, Bill, what the hell are you doing, man?" Bill turned to me and pointed. "It's still here," he yelled. "What? Really?" He nodded, then turned back around and looked back down. "Bill, come on, man. We should call this in. Angus said he didn't see anything, but then he said something weird, man. And I don't know." My voice trailed off as I stood there, watching Bill from a distance of a dozen feet or so. "Bill?" Without warning, Bill jumped. It took me a second to realize what had happened. A stream of several, "Oh God," swept out of my mouth as I ran forward to the edge of the lock. But Billings had disappeared. There wasn't even a ripple showing where he hit the water. I shoved my hands into all my pockets before I realized I left both my phone and radio back inside on the second floor of the building. "Damn it," I yelled, then sprinted back inside for my phone. It rang twice before a voice said, "We're sorry, the number you've dialed..." "Are you kidding me right now?" It was a staticky growl, and I picked up the radio. "Angus! Angus, it's Bill. He jumped into the damn lock, man. He's going to freeze to death or drown. Angus, come on, man. If you can hear this, call 911. My phone isn't working." The static grew louder, higher in pitch. Then I heard Angus say, Yeah, I hear you. Don't worry, they're already on the way." "Oh, thank God," I said. "Thanks, But Angus cut me off. "Don't tell them anything, okay? This isn't the first time. Billings was suicidal, okay? You're a good kid. I don't want you to..." The radio cut dead. 30 minutes later, A fire truck, followed by a sleek black SUV, pulled up. The firemen fished Billings out of the water, while two suits surveyed the area. One of them, with salt and pepper grey hair and mean eyes, stepped over to me and said, "Sir, we'd like to ask you a few questions." "He jumped, man. I didn't do anything." "Yes," the other man, bald with a beard, said. "I'm sure we'll be able to see." He gestured toward the CCTV camera that was hanging off the building. "Sir, did you see anything strange tonight?" I hesitated for a split second. "You mean stranger than my coworker jumping to his death?" Neither of the men's poker faces fell. "Yes," the graying one said. No, I didn't. Do you mind if we take a look inside? Maybe view the footage from the lock?" "What's that got to do with Billings drowning?" "We can get a warrant if necessary." "I mean, I just work here. You should call the boss and ask him. Look, I'm cold as hell. My coworker I've known for 3 years just died. Can I go home now? Maybe answer your questions later today." The two men seemed to think about this. "Fine," the bald one said, then reached forward and handed me an off-white business card. "Thanks, man." "Wait," one of the men called out from behind me. I turned. "You said your coworker jumped? Was he suicidal by any chance?" I said. I mean, he joked about it sometimes, but I never really thought he'd do something like. I never thought he'd actually do anything, you know." The man stared at me with an unreadable expression, then said, "All right, we'll talk to you soon." I left the area with no problem. I didn't really want to see Billings like that. I drove, went to bed, then woke up hours later and recorded this, just in case. I don't know what the hell happened, or what Billings saw down there. I realize now that those two suits probably confiscated all the tapes on the premises. But the strangest thing is, I can't get in touch with Angers, and I don't know what to do.
Clancy Pasta presents I've Been Hiding Under My Desk for 12 Hours. Written by Justin Tutts. You're probably wondering, how did he get here? Well, I'll tell you. It all started with Dave's fucking salmon casserole. It started around lunchtime yesterday. I'd been complaining to my cubicle neighbor, Karen, about the smell of Dave's reeking salmon casserole that his wife made him bring to work for the past few days. And Karen had been in the middle of telling me to bring it up with our manager when the fire alarm went off. We looked at each other, and then around the office. We couldn't see any fire anywhere, but being on the 15th floor, we didn't want to take any chances. I picked up my phone, and we walked out of the cubicles. Perhaps it was just a drill. Looking back, I wish it had been a drill. We walked out into the hallway with the elevators. Like most office buildings, you needed a pass to scan into the actual work areas. Confidentiality and the sort. I beelined for the elevators, but the stream of people flowing from the office reminded me that, in the case of a fire, you should always take the stairs. I was about to go and follow them when Karen grabbed my arm. "We're taking the elevator." I looked at her confused. "What do you mean, Karen? We have to take the stairs." She looked at all the people going down the stairs, then at me, then at the elevator call button. She pressed the button and met my gaze. "Oops, guess I'll take the elevator. I'm not taking 15 levels of stairs down to the main lobby for a drill. If it were real, we'd smell the smoke through the vents. By now, the flow of people had subsided, and it was just the two of us on the floor. I looked at her, then to the door leading to the stairs, then to the light that dinged, saying the elevator had arrived. On impulse, I went over to the elevator and got on. If the elevators were still functioning, then surely this was just a drill. Karen smiled smugly and came in after me. She pressed the ground floor button, and the elevator began its slow descent. So the boss is giving me some pretty important reports to work on. Something to do with the expenses in our genetics department. All very hush-hush. I think I'm in line for a promotion. Isn't that great? I looked at her and blinked. Of all the other accountants I'd wanted to be in an elevator with, why did it have to be her? Yeah, that's just great, Karen. She smiled again, not sensing my sarcasm. Yeah, it is. You'd better start kissing my ass now, Jim, if you ever want to get out of that entry-level position. My name's Mark. I've told her that multiple times, yet she insists on calling me Jim. The elevator slowed and then came to a halt. I looked up to the floor display, surprised to see that the elevator hadn't stopped on the ground floor like I'd thought. The small display showed the number 7, and I frowned, though I figured perhaps someone else had pressed the call button on that floor, and we'd simply get more passengers. I shrugged and passively listened to Karen, who was in the middle of a long-winded rant about how she was so glad that she would finally be the manager, and pulled out my phone. Due to being blinded by her own brilliance, she didn't notice that we hadn't stopped on the proper floor and stepped out into the hallway. She turned back to me and noticed the horrified expression that was plastered across my face. Confused, she asked, "What's wrong, Jim? Can't fathom how amazing I am?" She turned and snickered, stopping only moments before a large mass of gray steel crashed into her, splattering her against the wall. My breath caught, and for the first time, I allowed myself to peer out of the elevator past the dead man in a white lab coat that had horrified me before. The walls were caked in blood and viscera. Half a skull was stuck to the wall, marinating in a gooey glob of congealed blood and brain matter. Bits of white fabric were poking up here and there between masses of limbs and organs that had been pulverized by an unknown force. I choked back the bile as I looked to where Karen had ended up. What was left of Karen was pancaked on the wall. Next to her was a large gray filing cabinet that was crumpled along the edges as if by some sort of vice-like mechanism. Her hair was splayed against the wall like a halo around her fragmented skull. Her Gucci handbag was still attached to her flattened arm, though it was clearly stuck in the drywall. I choked back a scream filled with vomit as she began to peel off the wall, leaving her detached scalp behind. A thought crossed my mind, and in my shock, it took me a moment to realize what it implied. What through that filing cabinet? I slowly turned, as if the longer I refrained from looking at it, the less likely chance it had of existing. Yet, as my eyes fell upon it, I knew it never should have existed. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its head nearly scraped against the roof. There were bandages covering the entirety of its neck and head, seemingly obscuring its vision entirely. Though it was anthropomorphic in nature, the similarities between it and a human stopped there. Its arms were thick and sinewy, skinless muscles that rippled with each minuscule movement the creature made. On each of its wrists were large shackles with chains dangling off of them. At the end of its right arm was a raptorial hand, each claw tipped with a large talon. At the end of its left was a huge metal spike that rested with its tip on the ground. Several large clear tubes hung off its wide back and dangled just above the floor, and a black liquid flowed through them. Its legs were the size of tree trunks, each one tightly bound with leather straps that strained against the large vascular muscles. It stood still, moving only when it took in a deep breath from behind the bandages. A groan sounded from the other side of the floor, as if someone was pinned under something, and after seeing the huge filing cabinet it threw with such ease, I assumed that was the case. The creature moved in a flash, covering the distance between itself and where the noise came from in a matter of seconds. I heard the groan once more, followed by a series of sickening thuds as the creature brought its metal appendage down on the person over and over again. I turned to the floor buttons in the elevator, wondering why the damned thing wasn't moving, and my heart dropped. There were no more lights, no more power, just a single message displayed over the screen. Emergency. Please use stairs. I felt all hope leave me as I looked from the screen to the creature that was still thudding away on the person's corpse, eviscerating whatever remained. I weighed my options and realized I had two. Attempt to make it to the stairs or die. I chose the former and began silently creeping along the wall, headed for the exit door at the end of the hall. I was nearly there when my foot landed on top of something squishy and wet, throwing my weight out from under me. I hit the ground with a loud thwack, throwing my phone in a large arc behind me, back towards the elevators. It hit the ground with a loud smash, and, to my relief, the creature was soon standing over it, and not me. I slowly rose to my feet, wincing as my eyes fell upon the piece of scalp stuck to the ground as it began pulverizing my phone. I opened the stairwell door and crept inside, letting it click shut behind me. I began moving down the stairs, but stopped when I heard a roar coming from lower down. There's more than one. I felt like crying. I felt like throwing up. Yet I turned and walked back up the stairs, all the way up back to floor 15, where I could use my office phone to call for help. You may be wondering, why not stop on another floor and use someone else's phone? Well, the answer is simple. Our phones in this office are password protected. Anytime you want to use it, you have to enter a 4-digit code into the receiver, then dial a 9 followed by the number you wish to call. Anyway, I finally got back up to my floor and scanned my card on the access pad, gaining entry to my workspace. I walked quickly, yet quietly, up to my desk and sat down in my chair, grabbed the phone, and entered 9-911. I put the phone up to my ear, and nothing. There was no static, no waiting tone, nothing. I hung up and tried again. Nothing. Unplugged and plugged it back in. Nothing. Disconnected and reconnected the Cat3 cable from the back of the receiver. Nothing. I tried again and again. Nothing ever changed. I sat back and began to cry softly in my folded arms, feeling the futility of my situation. I stopped when I heard a loud crash come from the door where I'd entered from. I quickly pulled down my monitor and my keyboard down with me under my desk. I've been typing this slowly for the past 12 hours, in addition to browsing company files, stopping whenever I hear it walk by. It's been close several times so far, but I'm counting my blessings at this point. I just hope I make it out of here alive. Some of you may know where I am by now, but I'm asking. Don't come. Don't help. The files revealed what it is, and you can't stop it. Part 2. I finally stopped hiding under my desk after 13 hours. Okay, I know some of you have been waiting for an update, but a lot has happened since I posted the first bit. I'm happy to tell you that I'm fine. I somehow lived and am now at home. I just wish my wife wasn't making goddamn fucking salmon casserole. Okay, before I tell you what happened, hear me out. I get it. Tuna casserole is traditional, tastes great, and when you add just the right amount of celery with a pinch of salt, it typically comes out great. Top of the fucking line gourmet Caucasian cuisine. Now, what I don't get, and I got a lot of people in my DMs vocalizing the same thing, is who the hell spends nearly $30 per pound on salmon and puts it in a fucking casserole? I'll tell you who. Dave's fucking wife. She then told my wife, "Hey Maggie, want a great dish your husband will love?" And my wife was all like, "Oh hell yeah, my dude." So, now I have enough damn salmon casserole to last me a goddamn eternity. You may be asking yourself, how much salmon casserole is that? Well, I'll tell you. Any amount, because I'm not eating that shit. Dave ate it, and he was miserable. Give me macabre monsters that can throw filing cabinets any day of the week, but salmon casserole? No. Just no. Whew. Sorry about that. Just need to get that off my chest. Anyway, you're here not to hear my rant about salmon casserole, but about how I escaped. After posting that first bit, I remained curled up under the desk, shaking nervously with every footfall that happened just beyond the thin wall of my cubicle. I kept the files open on the monitor, reading all the while, trying to decipher any potential flaw in their design. Since so many of you wanted to glean information about their origins, I'll share it in a moment. Firstly, I want to approach the topic of my employer. I can't reveal that, no matter how much I may want to. They fabricated monstrosities that wiped out the entire genetics department. I couldn't hope to survive long with them on my heels. No, the only hope for amnesty is to keep their name out of it. Just know that they operate under the guise of a pharmaceutical company with a distribution chain that spans the globe. Enough said on that. Time for the juicy details you've been salivating over. Thankfully, I was able to slip the files from the company's mass file share onto a small USB I had stored in my desk. I'll paraphrase a transcript of the report to the executive committee below. October 25th, 2019. Location, Presidential Boardroom, 16th floor. Time, 9 to 9:30 EST. Genetics head, name removed, gave a presentation on October 25th, 2019 to the Board of Executives. The meeting held was to debrief the executive committee on the state of the project, including key high-level facets of the project, including timing, limitations, concerns, funding, and lastly, public safety in the event of a breach. The head genetics began the presentation by giving a brief yet thorough introduction. As you are aware, we've been working on this project for quite some time. In layman's terms, we have begun the process of implementing a genetic enhancement dedicated to provide the US military with the quintessential soldier. The project received $20 billion spread over 4 years in funding and unlimited access to military infantry for experiments, with little to no repercussions for breaking the law. Tests began a little more than 3.5 years ago, leaving us a little more than 6 months to bring the desired product. I am pleased to say that we are on track with the development despite the given limitations. Limitations? The president had interjected. Yes, sir. The compound used is an isomer of traditional somatotropin hormone, or human growth hormone, and as suggested, enhances the growth of humans. Typical uses of the regular hormone increase growth of human muscles and organs beyond their genetic potential. Our intent has been to alter the compound to a point where it increases all manners of growth. Simply put, we inject the hormone into the pituitary gland of our patients. There were certain limitations that were presented when we'd initially started. In this instance, it would appear that the longer the subject had been out of puberty, the more adverse effects were observed. They would grow disproportionately. To be exact, we had instances where their skeletons would grow before the muscle, causing them to burst through their skin and shred all muscle and skin in the process. They typically died almost instantaneously, as their bones thickened and squashed their skulls and back to their brain. Needless to say, it was rather gory. The solution to this problem was to ask for younger infantry members. Now, ideally, we would have had children in the age of 12 to 15. The youngest age they had to offer were those that were aged 17 and had joined with parental consent. At first, we'd brought in a couple of the more muscular males, figuring their bodies would be more suited to the rapid growth. Once again, we were wrong. The hormone caused their muscles to tear at an alarming rate, as the residual scar tissue caused by years of hypertrophy training grew brittle. This was atypical of our hypothesis for a couple reasons. See, we'd figured that they had the best shot of continued muscle growth, as their body would be used to the rapid tearing and healing that goes hand in hand with weight training. However, their muscles tore easier than we'd expected, due to the focus and training on low-intensity bearing muscle fibers to focus on size gain. We scrapped that demographic and moved on to the next, still in the 17-year age range, but we'd opted for the late bloomers, the children that hadn't yet reached the peak of puberty. Our efforts were proven to bear fruit, though they did raise some concerns. Though we did ultimately have 2 subjects survive the initial procedure, they were hindered by the second weaponizing part. The first subject lost all layers of his epidermis in the process to bond the steel alloy to his left arm, and an unexpected mutation of his right hand took place. He lost all vision as well, though his hearing was remarkably improved. Additionally, his quadriceps detached from each other. Though they remained functional to a degree, we fastened leather straps to them in order to secure them in place. One small issue is that any sound evokes a primal rage, the likes of which we haven't seen. It was only by some miracle that we were able to sedate him. The president spoke up. What about the second one? He fared much better, save for one small exception. Though he suffered no loss of any sensory, he became highly volatile and destructive. His actions appear to be motivated solely by his senses. If he smells, sees, hears, or touches anything that he doesn't like, he becomes enraged. Thankfully, we were able to sedate him, though, like the other, it required a significant amount of the sedative, pumping continuously through his system via a large dialysis machine. The meeting then concludes with them reviewing best courses of action to take regarding further action and other sub-projects they've been working on, though that information is of little consequence to my experience. Pretty crazy stuff, huh? Well, after I finished reading the documents, I slowly clicked back onto the web page with my prior post on it. Perhaps you could rig the fire alarm to go off again and use the noise to muffle your own. User Terminator 116, you saved my life. Thank you. With that, I attempted to log on to the company's security mainframe. It was operated by one of my coworkers named Doug. He was on the 12th floor, but I knew he'd patched it into the main intranet for ease of access on his part. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, this dude's an accountant. How on earth would he be able to get into the security system of a multi-million-dollar company? It's a fair question, one with several convoluted answers and one easy one. I knew Doug's login information. See, he'd shared it with me one day, because he had to leave early but wanted to make sure that he signed the digital timesheet at his usual time so he could still get paid for the full day. Yes, that's fraud. Yes, I'm an accountant, and we should be trying not to support fraud. But I was still relatively new within the company and didn't want to say no to a senior member of the company. Luckily, I still knew his login information and could access the security system with relative ease. Username, Doug.Francis. Password, Fuck Salmon Casserole 190. Okay, that clearly wasn't his password. Would you seriously think I'm going to share that on the internet? Of course not. Anyway, I was in. I hovered over the active status icon where it said Emergency in Progress and clicked Sound Alarm. Simple enough, right? No. Because why would anything be simple? The siren erupted with a banshee-like wail from the several alarms mounted on the walls, causing a loud guttural roar to sound out across the entirety of the floor. Shivers ran down my spine as the monster ran, crashing through the wall towards the sources of the alarm. Chunks of cement and rebar flew around the room, shattering computers, cubicle walls, and windows as he ripped out the first of the alarms. I stifled a scream, not wanting to draw any attention to myself. I slowly rose from underneath my desk, narrowly avoiding a large piece of concrete that was flung across the room. I flinched and turned to see the concrete smack into the far wall and get embedded in it. I gulped, knowing if one of those pieces hit me, I'd be dead. I began moving quicker, trying to get to the staircase on the other end of the floor, away from the staircase I'd originally come from. To get there, I had to cross the lunchroom and weave through another maze of cubicles. It proved to be a wise decision, for as I neared the entrance of the lunchroom, I heard another loud scream join in. I turned back, eyes wide and mouth agape. The second behemoth had joined the party. It stood half a head taller than the first one, though, unlike the first one, it had no bandages covering its face or body. It had no shirt on, just a large pair of what I would only assume to have once been baggy arm fatigues. They now clung tightly to his leg muscles, threatening to tear with each and every flexion. His torso rippled with sinewy muscles that moved underneath the skin like thousands of thick worms, all struggling to breathe. His arms were thick and muscled, though he didn't have the same weapons as the other behemoth. His hands were large and his fingers were thick. Each one looked like it could wrap around a basketball and crush it like a walnut. But that wasn't the worst part. His head appeared to have grown slightly disproportionate to his body, with his thick vascular neck muscles expanding out farther than the sides of his dome-like head. His eyes were sunken in with a mixture of blood and viscera dripping down from them. His teeth were sharp, and he smiled menacingly as he laid